Hello, this is Dr. Gene Mesco from Mostly Hairless Apes. This is the Mostly Hairless Ape Enterprise. We're going to be moving into the evolving Church of Science. Full disclaimer, no longer Gene Mesco, I'm the Rev DSC, first prelate of the evolving Church of Science, and we're working on completing the Bioble, our religious book of beliefs. And it's pretty basic. We'll get to it. But first, let's see if we can figure out what do we need. What do we need to learn from the Bible? We're going to learn a lot of different things. One of the things we learn about life from science is that belief is actually really important. This is what the math has told me. And if you look around the world, people put a lot of effort into churches. It's amazing. I used to be sort of annoyed with church, went through my recovering Catholic mode as an atheist, but now I'm a believer in science. Now I'm a member of the evolving Church of Science. And if you believe in science, you just believe in the shared reality. You just believe in the stuff that comes out of science. And as far as any deities go, you accept that there might not be one. You accept that there might be. Any of these churches could be right, but you would think after thousands of years, somebody would have figured it out. And we would have it right if there was just one true God out there. But science proposes the alternative, the null hypothesis. What if there isn't a deity? What if there is nobody else out there, if it's just us? And we're capable as humans to produce these amazing structures. And I think we can change the planet. And that's what I want to do. I want to change human history. That's all. By introducing the evolving Church of Science. Don't you think that would be a great thing? And then the question becomes, if we join the evolving Church of Science, why? Why should we join? Why should we join this? Why would this religion, this belief system, which is how I'm going to classify things, be better than anybody else's? And it's because we're going to do the math. That's the deal. We needed to invent religion years ago because we needed to believe in something. We needed to fill in our ignorance. That's really what religion does. It allows us to stop thinking. And we needed to calm down. That's the challenge. Humans were all over the place. We'll talk about human history because we're going to look at life through an evolutionary perspective from the evolving Church of Science. You might have figured that out. And humans invent stuff because it's needed. Now, what's needed obviously varies from human to human. And some humans have spent their lives focused on different endeavors, and some people don't want to get Pringles on their keyboard. Other people come up with different ideas, and whatever it might be, we come up with these amazing inventions. And I think what we did thousands of years ago is we came up with agriculture. We came up with this marvelous idea of how to grow crops and how to domesticate species. And we did the dog first, but we stopped being hunter gatherers and we became civilized humans. And how did we become civilized humans? Well, we invented cash money for stuff. That was another really great invention, having cash money for stuff, because then we didn't have to carry all of our wheat or our barley or our wine or our pigs to the market. We could just trade money. That was a brilliant invention. And then we invented rules to go along with this, because once we had money, we had to have rules. You have to have countries, you have to have governments, and you have to have rules. And ultimately, the rules about making stuff and using stuff all boil back to religions, because we haven't been able to justify the reasoning as to why we should have. Why should we have invented all these things? Why have we should figured out agriculture and economics and politics and economies and governments and all of these things? Because we have rules. We have rules, and that's what religions give us. Religions give us the idea that we don't have to fight each other. We don't have to kill each other. We can all work as a group and we can get something done. We can build amazing temples and churches to celebrate the majesty of an idea, of this idea of God, that this idea that there's this better place out there. And that's what humans do. We keep inventing stuff. And remember, these are our basic inventions of civilized humans. We trade resources. We manage the environment. We have rules about how we should behave, and we have rules because we believe something. What is science we should believe? I believe we should believe in the math. We should do the science and the math. The science and the math says, oh, there's all sorts of stuff out there. We can do all sorts of things with probabilities, for instance, because probabilities are where I want to go. That's what science gives us. This is what the Evolving Church of Science is going to give us over the next 10 lessons are some lessons about how to behave. And one of the critical ones is probability, because probability is basically our best guess. Now, if we were mathematicians, we could look at probabilities and we could say, hey, here's how we're going to do something. Here's the best chance of success. And probabilities are really cool because they work. And as a matter of fact, that's ultimately where we define reality. If we take this all the way down to the physics end and we go down to subatomic particles, we get into a probabilistic universe. And if that's the essence of our knowledge right now, it should also be the essence of our ethics. And so for our ethics, we don't know our ethics are the rules that allow us to build governments and economies and civilizations because we believe something. And if we believe in reality, we believe that the math works and the math lets us do things. Then we have to be able to start guessing about probability because now here's the big model. Here's the big ethical model. This all comes out of a mathematical group called information theory, a whole section of mathematics that just says, can we mathematically model information? And basically, information, in my definition, is a code for a pattern of matter and energy in space and time. So by that definition, just about everything's information. Everything can be coded. That's the trick. That's information. This is what brains do. This is going to be the model that we're going to build on. Because what we want to do is be able to talk about consciousness. If we want to understand a society, we want us to make better rules about how humans behave, well, then what we have to do is understand how human brains work. And the bottom line here is we're going to say that humans make decisions based on information. And information is something that we can quantify because we can transfer information. That's where we are right now in the whole fake news era, is that we're looking for explanations for things, and information is the codes for the pattern of matter and energy. It's all the words and the images that we pile up. And the problem is we don't have enough information. When we don't have enough information, then we have to guess. That's where we make probabilities. And that's where I'm going to propose probabilistic ethics. We're going to make the best guess, and we're going to go with that in making decisions. And that's going to give us our first rule. Because how do we make decisions? We have a whole bunch of information, and we synthesize that information. And we go on and we make decisions. And if we have lots of knowledge is information that is externally verified. That's going to be our definition moving forward. Knowledge is externally verified information. It's not stuff that's just in your head. It's in other people's heads. And it's been ideally verified by external evidence. So it's something we see repeatedly in nature. And because it's a pattern of information, we can call it knowledge, that we know what it is. I know what's going to be in trees. We know DNA is in all organisms because every time we've looked, DNA is there. And so when we have lots of knowledge, it's easy to make decisions because we know that something's gonna flam or it's not gonna flam if it's flammable. And if it flams, we have to be careful around it. And these are the things that make lots of decisions easy. The alternative is when you have belief. Belief means we think something is real, but we don't know. And all you can do when you have a belief is you can hope for the best. You hope you're on the right track. So when we do a civilization, when we make a decision, what I would prefer us to do is use knowledge over belief. That's the essence of probabilistic ethics. That's all science. That's all we say in the Evolving Church of Science. If we have to make a decision, how much information do we have about it? And how much of that information could be thought of as knowledge, which has been verified by some form of evidence, versus stuff that I don't have any evidence for, the belief. And that's the issue. And so that allows us then to move forward. And what we can say then is maximize probabilities in your favor. This is the 10th commandment of the evolving Church of Science. We're going to do the countdown here just because I love a top 10 list. And so when we have the top 10 list and you maximize probabilities in your favor, this is a rule for life for any member of the Church of Science, for the evolving Church of Science. We're going to look at a situation and we're going to use the most knowledge we can. We're going to use the most knowledge we have. We're going to make the fewest assumptions that we have. And hopefully, we're going to make a good decision. And that's all you can do. You make a good decision in life and you move on. And you go from there. Once you've made the decision, how are you going to make the decision? You have to do the math and the science. You have to look at all the information available. You have to do the math, add up the numbers, look at the probabilities, think about what the odds are, and you make your choice. And throw in a little bit of belief if you need to. But that's the whole point. Maximizing probability says if I have more information, I can make a better decision. So, and that way there's no regrets in life because then you're making the best decision you can with the information available at the time and you move on from there. And if things don't play out, hopefully you learn something. That's all you can do is learn from our mistakes and move forward. That's how it's going to work. And so the issue then becomes in our information theory model, we're going to start introducing math numbers here. We have information based on knowledge and information based on belief. And where, that's our K and our B down there. And what is we know and what do we believe to be true, but we don't have any evidence for. And that's how we make our decisions. Now, is that going to work out all the time? Of course not. But if you do use knowledge, if you say, hey, if I keep doing this over and over and it works, if I get a bunch of slaves and I get them to roll big rocks on stones, on wooden logs, we can move big rocks up these huge pyramids and we can praise our kings. Think about that. Think about thousands of years ago, people building the temples, the pyramids of Egypt. They thought that was a really great idea. And they got together and they did that. Probably because they believed their king was some sort of godlike deity. Because they were living at that point, the royals, and that's going to be one of the themes we'll have to deal with as we transform the planet from the evolving Church of Science, is all the aristocrats. Because religions got started, really, way back when we started building civilizations. So way back, whenever we got together, whenever people needed an answer, we came up with deities. We used to have animists, and then we came up with pantheons. And while we had pantheons, we were able to build all these different kingdoms because you had a god for everybody. Everybody could have a god. That's a really great thing. We should all have our own gods. We'll meet the god Questicon later in the evolving Church of Science, but that's something else. Now, the idea here is that the pyramids needed to do the math. And up to the today, and now where are we today? Today, we have a global satellite network. We can talk to anybody on the planet. We can observe things from all over. We have the ability to blow each other up with nuclear weapons. We have all sorts of things that we can do with our technology now. And we could build amazing things. But what do? We mostly fight each other. We do a lot of different things. We manipulate money. And who manipulates money? The people who have really lots of money. All those aristocrats again. So that's going to be the issue. So now the probability of humans surviving becomes the big issue. Because what are we working with here? We're working with the idea that humans can do the math, that we can solve problems, that we can figure things out, we can improve the human condition. And the thing that has most improved the human condition in terms of quality of life, however you want to think about it, is this thing we call science. Science is the best tool we've come up with to improve the human condition because you do the math. You maximize probabilities in your favor. You say, hey, if I put this machinery together this way and I generate power this way, I can turn on the fan and I can turn on the air conditioning and I can turn on the internet and I can turn on the kitchen blender and I can turn on the refrigerator and I can drive in a car and I can go out in outer space and I can make these cool clothes and I can make artwork. You can do all these beautiful things and all these useful things. And that's amazing. And that's what we've been able to do with science over the last centuries. I mean, if you want to talk about the scientific revolution, it started perhaps with math, with the Egyptians and the Arabic numbers and figuring stuff out and being able to calculate things. But it's exploded over the last few centuries to the point where we've taken over the planet. There's 8 billion of us, and that creates the problem. Here's one little experiment, the Universe 25 experiment. A guy named John Calhoun. He did something with mice, and he just basically played with the game of population density. He had mice in colonies, and he kept them together at different densities. And then he observed their behavior. And what he observed, and people have noticed this in a variety of different species, and we are yet another mammalian species. We're evolving social primates who tear together. And what happens is population density is a critical variable. Population density is a critical variable for the social system that's going to work for any given species. And that's the challenge we have. We have 8 billion humans living on the planet, and we have to figure out what the hell are we going to do with it. And that's what the Evolving Church of Science says. All of us have a problem. We all have problems. What's your problem? That is going to be the recurrent message every time the Evolving Church of Science meets and we get together for whatever our meetings say. The issue is always going to be to answer that question: what's your problem? What are you working on? Because that's the issue with the whole thing with maximizing probabilities in your favor. For what? Well, we'll see in the next chapter. It's to do good, but you have to define what good is. And so you have to make a decision in life. If you're just meandering through life, you're no good to us. You're just another mostly hairless ape taking up space. And maybe I can put you to work doing something if you don't have a brain of your own. But what I prefer is if you actually activated your brain and you dealt with the problem. And it's not easy dealing with problems. That's why we call them problems. And they might get, hopefully, sometimes you have to make a decision. Sometimes you have to experiment. Sometimes it's a big problem. Sometimes it's a little problem. Sometimes there's different opportunities. Sometimes you have to think about it. Sometimes you just need time. Obviously, the whole thing here is how do you play out solving a problem? Because that's what makes it life. That's what makes you an adult, professional human. Because that's the biggest problem. White, black, gay, straight, male, female, whatever binary choice you want to make. The biggest difference in my life that I've noticed is parent, non parent. If you're somebody who takes care of other people, who helps take care of the group, that means you've matured to a certain level of civilized behavior that we need, because that's the whole point. We're evolving social primates. The best thing we can do, on one level, I think, is at least keep us alive. And that's the main problem. And that's been my problem for life. I am a physiologist by training. My problem is to say, whatever problem I have, you have to solve it. Whether you're the Martian or whether you're MacGyver, you have to figure out the best solution to whatever problem you're facing. And ideally, in the big picture, we'll solve it with truth and beauty. We'll find the ultimate answer. We'll find the most beautiful solution. But how much of that can you find? How much is available for in any situation? All you can do is maximize probabilities in your favor. All you can do is say, what do I have to work with? What am I going to do? If you happen to have an anti-aircraft missile, you may be able to do something. If you've got poop and potatoes, maybe you could grow a farm on the moon. I don't know. But what works, what truthful and beauty can you uncover? That's the essence of science. And I'm a scientist. I'm a physiologist by training. That's been my job for decades now, to teach students how the heart works, how the basic heart works, how your digestive system works, how we take in nutrients and we process them in our stomach, and we eliminate waste. How do we do that? How do little molecules regulate all this stuff? How does insulin control blood sugar by controlling transport from the blood into cells? We have this compartmentalization that goes on in the body. There's this amazing machine that we call biology that runs life. And you have to expand beyond that. You really need to step up, and the whole idea of cojones, of gonads, growing a pair, is what we have to do in biology. Is when we mature. That's the standard definition of an adult in a biological setting. When we look at a population of organisms and we say, who are the adults? The adults are the ones who can reproduce. And reproducing is the essence of it, because here's the real truth. This is probably why our religions have mutated and evolved into what they are today, with their wonderful afterlives and heavenly areas, is because we're all going to die. Biology says keep reproducing, just keep growing, and keep the species alive. That's what biology does. And that's an eternal secret that we're still working on, along with all the other secrets of nature, of how stuff works. But when you keep the species alive, you acknowledge your death. You keep your children alive. You keep the group alive. And that's what is going to be our scale of civilization. Is your sacred honor is about doing good for the group, making the human species better. And if you're doing that, then you're doing good, in my opinion. That's what I think good is. What you think might be good, but no. So how do I make the species better? Well, I deal with all this natural information, all this information that bubbles up from my body, my feelings, my emotions, my thoughts, and I try to satisfy them. So I try to live the best life I can. I maintain my life and my liberty and my pursuit of happiness, and I get as comfortable as I can, and I satisfy my biological needs, and then I think about how to make it better. And that's the issue. I mean, for me, this is why I'm trying to start the Evolving Church of Science. Because to me, the biggest question is, how do we manage growth? We're going to keep growing. And maybe not. Maybe we'll start declining. Different countries have different patterns of demographics. And this is just something that's in terms of the basic reproduction question. I mean, these are some of the problems of the day. What do we do with lots of young people, lots of old people? This is all we're trying to do when we manage society. And we do it with religion, and we do it with economics, and we do it with government. And how do you best blend all those three things? Now you got to maximize probabilities in your favor. You got to get resources. You got to control your part of the economy. You got to control your biology. You got to control when you reproduce. You got to control your beliefs. Your belief system has to come in. What ethics? What's good? What's good and what's evil? Who's good and who's evil? Is everybody good? The whole species? That's what I like to think. But obviously, I would have disagreements with other people. But that's that problem with the age. The long term problem for humans, obviously, is the fact that we just live on this one little planet in outer space. And who knows who else is out there? There's ETs. We want to build our spaceships. Maybe we need to build an Earth defense network. The more immediate problem is just stabilizing who we are. We need to have a new government system. We need to have a new civilization that says, oh, we live on this one planet, and food and water and energy and matter all cycle through these ecosystems. And this is why we need to gardenify the planet. We're going to have a garden of things. That's why I'm going to start the garden party. That's going to be the political arm of the of the evolving Church of Science. Because if we have a garden party, our mode is to turn Earth into a garden. We've filled it up. There's no wilderness to deal with it. The only wilderness left is basically big garden spaces because we've surrounded it. We've taken over the planet with 8 billion of us. And obviously, how humans manage the planet varies in quality. But here's the now, if you think about how humans manage nature, we have some wild ideas sometimes. Sometimes we don't want people in charge who might be in charge. But we have whatever we have right now. And what we want is to somehow make the earth livable for as many organisms as possible. That's the challenge of the day. That's my mission and my goal, my problem that I want to work on. And maybe you want to work with me. Maybe you can scheme with the best of them. Because that's really what we all do. We all scheme. That's what makes Morticia gorgeous. Morticia schemes. Morticia has a plan. She's thinking about something and she's saying, what plans do you have? What belief system do you have? I believe in the evolving Church of Science. I think reality is what we can observe. Are there things we don't know? Yes. Do I think any of them involve a personal deity that intervenes with specific humans because they pray certain ways? No, I don't. I don't think that personal deities exist. I think there are forces that we don't understand out there, yes. But since I think it's a very low probability that any personal deity is going to step in and make miracles happen, change the laws of physics and chemistry and biology so that reality is different, I think that's bullshit. I think you're stupid if you're naive if you think that's going to happen. And you would have a really hard time at the Evolving Church of Science meetings. But that's the whole point. That's so we have to gather together. We have to think about what resources we have, what economic resources, what natural resources do we have available to maximize our probabilities. What resources do we have available, and what rules will we follow? How you can the rules change. Governments evolve all the time, and they have these beautiful things. And what are we going to do? How are we going to change the planet? Then I can maximize probabilities in my favor. I'm retired. I got a house, still got a mortgage, but I'm working on it. But I'm in pretty good shape financially. How are you doing? What rules do you choose to follow? And that's the issue. And this is what's going on now. We have, I mean, the civilization is a bunch of humans who share a belief system. And we share that through mental information in that belief system. Obviously, we can share knowledge. Knowledge can be shared with anybody, but beliefs are personal. And unless we have some common beliefs, we really can't have a civilization because we're going to disagree on those core issues. And as we interact on our ethical basis, that's our belief system. We have to balance our economic and our government and our natural information and our belief system information and react to those selective pressures. And that's the thing we're doing. We're evolving all the time. And when you understand evolution works by the application of selective pressure, and in the case of artificial selection, it's what humans do with our consciousness. It's what decisions we make. And hopefully, if you can minimize your emotions and feelings, minimize the natural visceral information bubbling up into your body from whatever situation, you calmly think about a problem. You can continue your quest for truth and beauty and join the symptoms and know that truth is beauty, beauty is truth, sir. That's right. That's what we've got here. Have a lovely day, and I'll work on chapter 9 next, the ninth commandment.